In 1957, Ingmar Bergman, the master of Swedish cinema, filmed an image that became forever engraved in the memory of art. A medieval knight, returning from the Crusades, faces death in a game of chess on a deserted beach. The sky, heavy with clouds, announces the end of times. He is not playing only to save his physical life, but to wrest answers from the silence of the universe. He wants to know if God exists, if pain has a purpose, if death is truly the end. He believes that if he can delay checkmate, he will be able to decipher the great enigmas of existence. That image, though belonging to fiction, is an unflinching portrait of what we are in the modern world. Since the beginning of time, human beings have tried to negotiate with death, with fate, with reality itself. We throw ourselves into solving life as if it were a mathematical problem, convinced that once we find the solution, we will at last find peace. That's why we immerse ourselves in self-help books, personal development courses, religions, philosophies, therapies, and productivity techniques. All of them promise the same thing: a formula to free us from uncertainty. But there is something profoundly tragic in this relentless search. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard saw it clearly in the 19th century. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be lived. The more we try to dissect it, explain it, or master it through reason, the more it slips through our fingers like fine sand. Kierkegaard described the human being as torn between two irreconcilable forces: finitude and infinitude. On one hand, we are limited by time, the body, and space. On the other, we feel an insatiable thirst for the absolute, for eternity, for total knowledge. That unbearable tension drives us to create systems to soothe our anguish. Some seek in fleeting pleasures the meaning they lack, others cling to the ethical life, to duty, to social conventions, and still others take refuge in religion, hoping to find answers that will silence forever the abyss of not knowing. The problem is that even our noblest constructions, science, philosophy, faith, can become subtle forms of postponing real life. Like Bergman's knight, we remain seated at the board, moving pieces in the hope of finding the perfect strategy to defeat death. But Kierkegaard warns us, in this game, victory does not exist. The true act of freedom is not to win, but to stand up from the table. To live even without knowing. To embrace mystery, risk, and paradox. Since antiquity, the human intellect has been revered as the supreme tool to conquer the world, to decipher the mysteries of nature, and to secure for ourselves a privileged place in the cosmos. The history of thought, from classical Greece to the Enlightenment, has repeated to us that thinking deeply, analyzing rigorously, and seeking logical coherence is the path to truth, and that truth will bring us freedom and happiness. But Kierkegaard delivers a disturbing warning against this almost religious faith in the power of reason. The mind, he says, can become an invisible prison. The intellect is like a sharp blade. It can open new paths, but it can also wound us. The more we use it to scrutinize every last detail of existence, the further we drift from the living pulse of immediate experience. We become lost in an endless labyrinth of reflections, hypotheses, and theories, while life, with its flavors, pains, encounters, and farewells, continues beating outside, without us. In one of his most famous phrases, he wrote, "The greatest danger of all, losing oneself, can happen so quietly as if it were nothing at all." This is the tragedy of the mind. The individual can devote themselves entirely to trying to understand everything, without realizing that in the process they are abandoning themselves. The knight in the seventh seal is a living example of this tragedy. His thirst for absolute answers keeps him absent from the present. While he negotiates with death, he cannot look into the eyes of those he loves or feel the sea breeze. Kierkegaard sees that behind this intellectual effort hides fear. Fear of chaos, of the void, of discovering that perhaps there are no definitive answers. For him, the human being is finite, yet tormented by the desire for the infinite. From this tension is born existential anguish. And to anesthetize it, we build intellectual castles, religions, theories, dogmas. But these castles are fragile before the insurmountable mystery that is life. We believe that by understanding it we gain security, but in reality, we have become mere spectators. Reason, Kierkegaard says, should serve life, not rule it. When we put it on the throne, we turn existence into an unsolvable riddle. He did not reject thought. What he denounced was the danger of living only by observing, planning, and analyzing without daring to step onto the stage. Perhaps life cannot be understood in its entirety. Perhaps it can only be lived. And living means accepting uncertainty, contradiction, and fear, and still moving forward. But if reason cannot resolve life, what is left for us? To answer this, Kierkegaard described 3 fundamental ways of facing anguish, 3 life stages that are not mere theories, but concrete ways of living. The first is the aesthetic stage, where the person is driven by pleasure, novelty, and intense sensations. It is the realm of impulses and constant entertainment. The greatest enemy here is routine. The meaning of life always seems to be in the next experience, in the next conquest. But the problem is that pleasure is fleeting, and when it fades, it leaves behind an even more painful emptiness. The second stage is the ethical. After the frustration of the aesthetic life, many seek stability in commitment, duty, and moral rules. The person takes on responsibilities, integrates into society, and builds a solid identity. But even here, there may hide a strategy to avoid a face-to-face encounter with uncertainty. Ethics can be another system to control life, a barrier against the absurd and radical freedom. And finally, the religious stage, the most mysterious. This does not necessarily mean institutional religion, but a leap toward an existence that transcends both aesthetic pleasure and ethical rigidity. It is the territory of mystery and paradox, where one accepts that there are aspects of life that cannot be understood, only lived. Here appears one of Kierkegaard's most striking concepts, the teleological suspension of the ethical, exemplified in Abraham willing to sacrifice Isaac in obedience to God. An act that breaks all moral norms, but which for Kierkegaard is the supreme act of faith, obeying an absolute call even when no one else can understand it. This leap is not an escape from anguish, but its bravest confrontation. Living this way means giving up guarantees, accepting that there will be no absolute certainties, and deciding to exist with the greatest intensity possible. From this comes his most famous concept, the leap of faith. It is not about believing blindly out of habit or fear, but a radical act of freedom. There comes a moment when reason hits a wall, where no explanation is enough. And there, we either take refuge in artificial certainties, or we throw ourselves into the unknown, trusting that there is meaning even if we cannot see it. The leap of faith is not abandoning reason, but taking it as far as it can go and then daring to continue without its guidance. It is loving knowing you can lose. It is creating without knowing if there will be fruit. It is stopping the chess game with death and stepping out to dance with life. Kierkegaard reminds us that there is no manual for living. That freedom is a gift, but also a vertigo. That no one can take the leap for us. And that, even though we are alone in that decision, there is a silent voice calling us to say yes to life even without certainties. The great question is, what board are you still defending? What move are you still planning while life waits outside? Perhaps the moment has come to drop the pieces and look at the sea. Perhaps, and only perhaps, life is not waiting for you to understand it, but for you to dare to enter it. It does not want you to dissect it like a scientist before a dead specimen. It wants you to breathe it in, to chew it, to feel it burning on your skin and in your blood. Life does not offer itself to those who analyze it from afar, but to those who dirty their hands with its mud and let themselves be drenched by its rain. Ask yourself, here and now, will you keep moving pieces on a board that will never end? Or will you stand up, let the pieces fall, and walk toward the horizon, even if the fog won't let you see more than a few steps ahead? Because the real danger is not death. The real danger is reaching the end having been only a spectator in your own story. It is having protected yourself so much from risk that, without realizing it, you also protected yourself from the intensity of being alive. Kierkegaard knew it. The leap of faith is not for the fearless daredevils, but for those who, despite their fear, say, "Here I am, and I leap." And on the other side there is no promise of victory, no safe refuge, no applause. Only mystery. Only vertigo. only the intimate certainty of having lived with the flame burning. So close the book of formulas, put away the board, look at the sea. The tide rises and falls, indifferent to your plans. The wind strikes your face as if it wanted to wake you. Time does not stop, and neither should you. Take the leap. Not to understand life, but to breathe it. Not to win, but to be. Not to solve it, but to live it.